All right, this is Henry McClure, and I'm over here in Lawrence and Dana Anderson's office, and he's been gracious enough to answer a few questions for the history geeks of Topeka about the Richmond Gordman Center. Hey, Dana. Good morning.
Hi, Henry.
Hey, so one thing, I've been involved real estate-wise with you for a long time, and I know that you've been involved with that real estate for a long time.
Yes.
One thing that I never really figured out, when you were assembling those apartments or the land, how did it end up with the Mays family owning certain parcel and the Ernest and Campbell, with the two ground leases? How did that really work out?
Well, the original Mays deal, I met Mace and Richard. They came to Topeka in February of '65. And I saw the car parked along Fairlawn Avenue north of 29th Street next to this empty ground. It was a Lincoln Town car with three guys in there with a map spread over the dash. Turned out to be Mace Siegel and Richard Cohen of MaceRich, and the head of real estate for Arlen's department store, which doesn't exist anymore, but Leonard Cohen was that guy's name, who now is one of the major owners of Bed Bath & Beyond. Anyway, I stopped, knocked on the window. They invited me in. I said, I'm a real estate broker. It looks like you're looking at real estate. Could I help you? The guy from Arlen said, I don't really like the suburbs. I'd rather be on Topeka Boulevard, somewhere north of the mall, south of 29th Street. And we drove along there, but he said we didn't find anything, and they had been to another broker who did commercial only. And in those days, I was just looking for any kind of deal that I could make anywhere.
What's changed?
And that's right, nothing. And so I said, look, I know of this piece. And Tim Merle, who was an attorney, I'd been involved in Evans, Anderson, Kimball, and Holman, a company that went belly up when I was 27 years old. And that firm represented me. And he had mentioned to me that he had this client, an old lady, who owned that, Nellie Mays owned that ground. And there were some small businesses out front. Anyway, we went over there and looked at it, and I could tell immediately the guy from Arlen loved it. But they said there's four businesses in front, and there's a trailer park right behind a small trailer park. Well, can you get rid of those? We'd have to, get rid of those leases. And I said, well, sure, I can get it done. And they also wanted a street through there and a stoplight. And anyway, long story short, I got to work. We moved. There was a car wash. We moved away, bought out. There was an auto parts store, Jefferson or something like that, I think was the family. We moved them. There was a Dairy Queen that belonged to Boyles, and Joe Smith used cars. And I went to those people and actually ended up making other deals to move them off of there. We got rid of all the tenants. You couldn't do it in a mobile home park today, but in those days you just had to give them notice. And then there was a cornfield behind that, and the total thing was maybe 12 acres. Right next to that, to the north, was another piece that these two right-of-way guys had purchased. And we ended up doing ground leases. They wouldn't sell. We did ground leases with both of those. We ended up buying out the small piece, the two guys on that north side, which ended up being the north side of 32nd Terrace that we took through there. And it took months, but we finally put that deal together. And in all candor, I think that's why Mace and Richard asked me to join them. And they had just created MaceRich the previous fall, in October, when they met me in February, and we joined up and we're together ever since. They're both deceased now, but the company that ended up, MaceRich, is now part of the S&P 500. It's a $14 billion company and the third biggest mall owner and developer in the United States.
Dana, go ahead.
Anyway, that was an Arlen's department store. And in a couple of years, we did 16 different strip centers around, did the first big Walmart in Joplin, did a Kmart in Springfield, but most of them were Arlen's, and that company went broke. I went to Omaha and brought Richmond Gordman down here to take that Arlen store, and it was actually interesting because when Mace came to town to look at the grand opening of that as a Richmond Gordman, the re-grand opening after it in Arlen's. I had just been informed that the owners of White Lakes Mall weren't very happy. As owners, they hadn't seen a dime out of it, and they might be interested in selling. I took Mace on a walk through White Lakes Mall and told him what I saw there. We ended up buying White Lakes Mall, and that's how we got in the mall business, and that's what has now grown into that major public company. Just as an aside.
We'll talk about, I mean, one thing that's really fascinating to me about this love story that you've overlooked was the deal that you made with Tony Beck.
Well, that was several years later when Arlen's went belly up. Tony Beck, who had been the manager of White Lakes and who was a big KU guy, as was I, big fan and involved in the JR Club at Topeka. He was the guy who signed me up when I got out of school in '56, and he was treasurer of the JR Club in Topeka, and I signed up. He's the guy who signed me as a member of the JR Club right out of college. I worked for Kansas Fair and Light. Anyway, he had ended up with a couple of other jobs, but now was with Dayton Hudson Company in Minneapolis. I had visited him up there when KU was playing Minnesota in a football game. Target was a brand new entity for Dayton Hudson. They only had like 7 of them. And when Arlen's went belly up, I said, Tony, there's 15 or so of these stores in these different properties that we have in Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. You and I can both be heroes with our companies. We need a tenant and you need locations. And these are great locations. And I personally was involved in acquiring the locations, and I know them backwards and forwards. Sending properties. Long story short, we made the deal, which caused Target to double in size overnight and made me a hero with MaceRich, which caused me to become a partner in the company.
Dana, there are a lot of people in the real estate business that owe a lot of success to you. And I'm one of them. I appreciate what you've done. You know, you told me you liked hiring us from Topeka because you knew our background, good or bad. But you knew we wouldn't mind relocating.
Right, it's exactly true. I remember a lot of people I hired initially were from this area. And later on when we moved our company to California, and I would interview people from USC or UCLA or Berkeley or wherever. They didn't want to leave California, and the idea of going even to a place like Boulder, they might go if you told them it won't keep you there more than 6 months or a year, but they were very dictatorial, and I hated that. Where in Topeka, the people I interviewed are all over Kansas. All they wanted was an opportunity, and if I said, you know, you need to go to Great Falls, Montana, that was not a problem for them, or Topeka, Kansas, absolutely. So I always liked and admired the will-do tendency of the people from Kansas.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time. I mean, this is, you know, you've truly been a part of Topeka's history, but you've been a part of retailing history, because, like, how many stores did Target have open at the time you did the deal?
I think 7 or 8 they had open, and we doubled the size essentially in a short period of time.
And think about over time how many retailers you've grown in MaceRich. I mean,
yes. Well, Volume Shoe, Payless Shoe from Topeka. I remember arguing vociferously with Mace and Richard when I wanted to put them in a center we had in Columbus, Georgia, down by Sears, where nobody else wanted to go, and those guys said, you know, Dana, you're a big advocate for people from Kansas, but these people are really, you know, they don't belong in malls, and they're never going to be a Kenny shoe store. Well, they let me make the deal, though, begrudgingly, and then some 20 years later, I pointed out to them that no longer was Kenny Shoe the #1 family shoe store, but the #1 family shoe store was Volume Shoe, Payless Shoes from Topeka.
Well, I used to live next door to Dick Stutzman.
Sure.
And, you know, Dick always said, you know, he was always angry that, you know, hey, you only liked us until we became a big company. And I said, au contraire, you know, because I've seen some of those meetings when you were advocating putting, you know, Payless in the deal.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I loved about MaceRich was the week or the monthly leasing meetings we used to have in California. And plus when, you know, coming to Boulder originally, and then the East Coast meetings that we had, I know you've got a lot of Mace stories, but what's one of your memorable? And you don't have to have one of my deals be one of your memorable events, but what's one of your memorable things in the leasing meeting that kind of was that sticks in your mind over the years?
Well, speaking of Mace, I mean, he had a lot of fundamental, great knowledge of real estate and a great way with people. One of the things that he drilled into me at an early age is treat people like you'd like to be treated. And I really found that a cardinal rule to live by. And, I was a pretty aggressive, rash person as a young man. And he helped me mature and develop a better sense of judgment. And I've always been indebted to him for that. But he also said, always do business in a business-like manner and get your deals in writing, not conversation. And he said, use the phone to make appointments. Don't try to make deals over the phone, or later on when we developed the emails with emails. He said, meet people personally, develop a relationship. And that's one way we bought all those malls over the years when we were acquiring malls, was to develop a relationship with people that owned it, even when they said, we really aren't interested in selling, but someday we might be. We kept in touch with those people. A lot of the deals we made, it took us 7, 8, 9, 10 years to end up buying their mall, but we got the job done.
In speaking about Mace, he was almost clairvoyant about people, how you could describe people to him, and then it's like he already knew them. Did you ever feel that?
Yeah, no, he extreme perception about real estate and people. I never knew anybody that could walk into a strange town, and I was showing 2 or 3 locations, and sorry. And he would come to the right conclusion very quickly about a given town, and that happened to me time and time again as to what was good real estate and what wasn't good real estate. I learned an incredible amount from him.
Well, Dana, I got to tell you, one thing you touched on about treating people the way you want to be treated. This is my 38th year in the real estate business.
Sorry, hello? Yeah.
What?
Oh, listen, I need to call you right back, Jim. I'm in a conference here. I'll call you right back. Thank you.
Okay, so...
Sorry.
No, real quickly, I just want to say, I've always treated my clients as if I'm advising you, because you've always been very tough on me, which has been good for me. And I want to take a minute to thank you for your patience and how you've helped me as a professional. And I truly want to thank you for these pearls.
I always felt like you had great potential. You were a little ornery and a little impetuous, but I saw a lot of potential for you. And you always were a great deal maker. You had a nose for a deal and an ability to make relationships with people, and you were a great salesman, and that's an important part of being successful in real estate.
Well, Dana, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning for me personally, business-wise, and it's a piece of the MaceRich Company, and what we learned and what some of the young men saw. A lot of people will never know. I mean, what we learned in those leasing meetings, seeing deals get approved firsthand, I mean, that was golden. One of the more interesting things about Mace was, what I found interesting was that one day he said, I'm worried about our company becoming so bureaucratic that we can't get deals done. And, I was sharing with you most recently, some of my follies of trying to get a deal done with a mall owner. And what do you have any thoughts on that, on the signing off?
Yes, Mace used to say, rent is a function of sales. If the tenant doesn't have the sales, he can't pay the rent. I don't care what you put in the lease. The fact is, rent is a function of sales. So the quicker you get a tenant, when you sign the lease, now you got to get him open in business in order that he can afford to pay the rent. You can't just say, well, the lease says he has to start paying rent in 90 days. Don't take that attitude. Help him. Go to the city. Do whatever you need to. Help that tenant get open, because rent is a function of sales, and all you're going to do is have a bankrupt tenant if you don't help him get open and get started in a positive way.
All right, cool. We've taken a lot of your time. I sure appreciate it, David.
No problem.
You're
Thank
a good
you.
man. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.